Okay, so there's like a new 10-minute possibility here. I'm way too excited about it, but let's get into it. I have never made content specific to Black love, romantic involvement, relationships. I feel like I've spoken a lot about just being kind of like in community with folks across the diaspora. But this video is a video that is thoughtful of all types of romantic human relationships, but it is a video I'm creating specifically with folks in the African diaspora in mind in relationship to heterosexual romantic relationships. I do think there's something to be valued about this conversation for, again, all types of humans across gender, racial, ethnic, and desirability spaces. Okay, so let me just put that out there at the top. With that being said, I want us to create some tension with the ideas of worth versus value. So I want to start there, right? So because I'm forever an academic and forever a teacher, I gotta tell y'all, I love a good dictionary. I love getting some definitions. So I want to start with some primary definitions of worth, okay? These include things like quality that renders something desirable, something useful, something have material value, industrial designations. There's also the idea of like perceived worth, right? But the idea of worth being attached to producing an advantage to make the effort. So it's worth my effort, right? Now, the etymology of the term worth, it's an Old English word that points to things of value, something valued or appreciated. And so one of the things I'm going to like assert today is that concept worth has a certain amount of social aspect to it, meaning something is worthy because more than one individual is seeing it, right? Money has worth. Currency has worth in our society because groups of people say that it has it. Okay. Now, oftentimes not, we see people use the term worth and value interchangeably, like they are the same thing. And then for certain people, that might be the case. But again, I want to argue the first kind of assertion I want to make today is possibly that we start to see some of the tensions between both of these terms. So when we think of something like value, we're looking at the importance of something. Something is considered important. There is an intrinsic excellence or desirability attached to it. And I'm sorry, I'm not giving you all the, like, citing the multiple dictionaries that I've looked at, okay? But there have been multiple. Oxford, Cambridge, all of those English ones, all right? So follow me here. The etymology of the term value is Old French for valor, to be worth, right? And that creates conversation in my brain around being. All right, so a little side note, right? When we're talking about being, what we're looking at is a school of thought around ontology, which is like study of being, of existing, questions of existing, what it means to be. So that's an ontological claim when you assert that I am, therefore, is that how that goes? Okay, I digress. So again, what I'm contending off top is that worth is something that has a social element to it. Something has worth because socially we've kind of decreed that it is. Whereas value is a little bit more intrinsic, right? Something that is important to Kina may not be important to my friend Noel. Okay. So with those in mind, I think it's important that I want to give us a little bit more philosophical contour here. So again, I mentioned earlier that ontology is about the study of being, questions of being and existence. And it's closely tied to a study of axiology, which is like questions of value, the study of value, which leads to epistemic claims. Epistemology is like the study of knowing. How do we know? How do we think through things? Okay. Take a moment. That's a lot of information. All right. So ideally, what I am going to make the second thought here is that partially what we see as existing shapes how we see ourselves and what we see in other people. And what we see as important, which is our values, right? And and who we see as important shapes what we believe to be true in the world. And it shapes our knowing, right? It shapes the kind of data we look for and observe, and also the kind of data we take in, right? And then henceforth, all of these things shape our behaviors, all right? So all of that philosophical buzzwords to say what we value in ourselves is going to be what we value in others. And this is the thing that is really specific to the thought that I have around Black love, particularly Black romantic involvement. Generally speaking, for all humans, all Homo sapiens, intimacy is hard because, like, loving someone requires trust, vulnerability, all that jazz. But intimacy within the Black community is especially challenged by racism, xenophobia, and anti-Blackness, right? In particular, in an anti-Black world where multiple anti-Black genocidal projects are happening at any given time, systems and institutions are both not only like dehumanizing Black folks, but devaluing us, right? And so if we don't have a placeholder in terms of social worth, right? So if the larger society, global, nationally, regionally, whatever, wherever you live, has deemed that you are not worthy, then it is that much more difficult for one to have a sense of intrinsic value. Yes? And so then if I don't have a sense of intrinsic value, then it's that much more difficult to transport that out, meaning I don't see value in myself, so then it's more difficult to see value in others. Okay? And so that's going to show up in my behaviors. In this moment where a lot of Black women, and I think this is across sexual expression, right? I see this coming up not in just straight, relationships, but even in same gender romantic involvement, where there's a critique of Black masculinity and Black men, right? A valuable and necessary critique. I think part of the challenge here is that in these romantic involvements, we are hoping that someone else sees value in us, right? That is the goal. That's at least one of the intentions we have in connecting our lives with people in that way. But oftentimes and not, because of these genocidal anti-Black projects, we often have a hard time seeing the value in each other as Black folks, simply because we've not done the healing work to see the value in ourselves. It's really tricky. Now, someone might see this long as video and say, Kina, you could have literally just said, you can't love anybody else if you can't love yourself. Heard. But I do think it's important to actually provide, again, that kind of structural critique and the language to help people really name, okay, what's the nuanced tensions here? It's not as simple as Black people can't partner together because they just don't want to get their together. I think we really have to look at what are those long-standing generational impacts of, again, living in a world where people in the African diaspora are constantly giving the single story of how little our lives matter, right? So, wrapping this very long video up to say that it is super important in all of the work we do, manifestation, energy, spiritual, prayer, whatever the thing is, return to the fact that your deepest investment must always be oneself. Because if I can't find value in myself, then it's that much trickier to find value in others. The more you know.